The scream did not sound human. It cut through the hospital corridor like broken glass, sharp and sudden, forcing nurses to stop mid-step and patients to sit upright on their beds. "Remove it! Please! Remove it!" The voice came from Ward B. A teenage girl sat upright on the hospital bed, her eyes wide, her entire body shaking violently. Her hands clawed at the bedsheet as though she was trying to pull herself away from something only she could see. A cleaner stood frozen at the doorway. In her hand was a broom, not raised, not moving, just present. "Drop it!" a nurse shouted. The broom fell from the woman's hand and clattered softly on the tiled floor. The girl screamed again, louder this time, curling into herself, tears streaming down her face. Doctors rushed in. They checked her pulse, her temperature, her breathing. Everything was normal. No injuries, no wounds, no explanation. The doctor turned slowly to the woman standing by the bed, the girl's mother. Her wrapper trembled as she shook. "Madam," the doctor said carefully, "I need you to answer me honestly." He paused. "Did you ever beat this child with a broom?" The woman's knees buckled, and the past came rushing back. Aroetsu village was not loud. It did not announce its laws with shouting or threats. It whispered them, softly, repeatedly, until they became part of breathing. Women learned the rules before marriage, before childbirth, before motherhood. One of those rules was never debated. A broom was not just wood and straw. In Aroetsu, brooms were used after funerals, not before meals. They were used during cleansing rites, not moments of anger. They were tools of separation, not discipline. Elders said, "A broom removes what should not remain." That was why mothers warned one another. Beat a child with your hand or cane if you must. Scold with words if you must. But never, never use a broom. Because a child was still becoming, and a broom did not know love. Imade was 7 years old. She laughed loudly, ran barefoot through red earth, asked questions elders avoided. She was her mother, Uara's only daughter, sharp-eyed, quick-tongued, stubborn in a way that frightened older women. "She has too much fire," neighbors whispered. But fire in Aroetsu was not always bad. It only needed guidance. Imade followed her mother everywhere, talking endlessly, questioning rules, imitating chores, but never finishing them properly. "She will grow out of it," Uara often said, but motherhood was tiring, and patience, like firewood, could finish unexpectedly. That evening, Uara returned home exhausted. Her back ached, her head throbbed, her patience was thin, the compound was dirty, the sweeping poorly done. Dust lay stubbornly on the ground as if mocking her. "Imade!" she called sharply. The girl turned, smiling, not sensing danger. "I swept it already!" she laughed. That laugh snapped something inside Uara. Without thinking, without remembering, her hand reached for the nearest thing, the broom. "Uare!" her husband Osaman shouted from inside the hut. "Leave that thing!" But frustration is louder than wisdom. The broom came down once. Not hard, but enough. The wind shifted. Imade froze mid-laugh, and somewhere beneath the red earth of Aroetsu, something listened. Imade did not cry that night. That was what frightened Uara the most. She burned with fever. Her body shook. Her lips moved, whispering names no child should know. When Uara tried to sweep the hut the next morning, Imade screamed and collapsed. When a neighbor passed with a broom, Imade covered her ears and vomited. The elders were called. Pa Ogiriga arrived slowly, leaning on his staff. He listened, he watched. Then he said quietly, "You did not discipline your daughter. You swept her path." And Aroetsu fell silent. After Pa Ogiriga spoke those words, fear did not rush in. It settled. It sat quietly in the corner of Uara's hut, watching everything. Imade lay on a mat, her small body rising and falling unevenly. Her eyes were open, but she was not really looking at anyone. It was as though her gaze had been pulled inward. Yura knelt beside her daughter, shaking. "I didn't mean to," she whispered again and again. "I was just tired." Pa Ogiriga did not answer immediately. He walked slowly around the room, his staff tapping the ground softly. "This is how it always begins," he finally said, "with tiredness, with anger, with forgetting." Osamen stood near the doorway, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Outside, neighbors gathered quietly. No one laughed, no one whispered. They all remembered the law. That night, Imade spoke clearly for the first time since the beating. But the voice was not hers. Her tone was flat, old, calm in a way that chilled the room. "Why did you sweep me?" she asked. Yura screamed and grabbed her daughter, pressing Imade's head to her chest. Pa Ogiriga raised his hand sharply. "Do not block her," he warned. "Whatever has entered must be heard." Imade's eyes rolled slightly as she continued. "I was not dirt," the voice said. The oil lamp flickered violently. Outside, a goat bleated and suddenly went silent. Pa Ogiriga closed his eyes. "The path has opened," he said, "and it has recognized her." At dawn, the elders gathered under the Iroko tree. Yura sat apart, her wrapper pulled tightly. Around her, shame burning her skin. Pa Ogiriga spoke to them in a low voice. "A broom is not a stick," he reminded them. "It does not beat, it removes." He explained what few people like to say openly. In ancient times, brooms were used to sweep away misfortune after strange deaths. They were never meant to touch the living in anger, especially not children. "When a child is beaten with a broom," he said, "the ancestors believe the child is what must be removed." A heavy silence followed. "And when part of a child is removed," he added, "something else takes its place." From that day on, Ewera stopped sleeping. Every time Imade stirred, she jolted awake. She watched her daughter constantly, how she breathed, how she blinked, how she stared at empty corners of the room. Sometimes Imade laughed softly at nothing, sometimes she cried without tears. Whenever Yura reached for the broom, Imade screamed as if struck. Yura hid the broom outside the compound. Still, the fear remained. She began to understand something terrifying. Love did not protect her daughter from consequences. After 3 days, Imade collapsed again. This time, it happened when a neighbor swept her compound. Imade fell as if pulled backward by invisible hands. That was when Osamen spoke. "We must leave Aroetsu," he said. The elders did not argue. Pa Ogiriga sighed deeply. "You can leave the village," he warned, "but you cannot outrun a swept path." Yura did not listen. Fear was louder than wisdom. That night, they packed quietly. At dawn, the family left Aroetsu village. Behind them, the Iroko tree stood unmoving, watching, remembering. The city welcomed them with noise. Car horns blared endlessly. Voices overlapped. Concrete replaced red earth. To Ewere, it felt like safety. In the city, nobody asked about ancestors. Nobody spoke of brooms as spiritual tools. Nobody cared where you came from. "This place will change everything," she told herself. Imade stared out of the bus window quietly, her forehead resting against the glass. The buildings looked tall and lifeless, stacked like boxes. She did not smile. When they arrived at their small apartment, Yura sighed in relief. "No Iroko trees," she whispered. "No elders watching." But Imade felt it immediately. The air was heavier. Something followed them in. Imade's new school smelled of chalk, dust, and sweat. Children laughed loudly. Teachers shouted freely. Discipline was sharp and impatient. Yura kissed her daughter's forehead nervously before leaving. "Be good," she whispered. "Please." Imade nodded. For the first few hours, everything was normal. Then it happened. A cleaner entered the classroom quietly, dragging a broom across the floor. The sound was soft, barely noticeable. But Imade's body reacted instantly. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled, her vision blurred. She screamed, not loudly, sharply. She collapsed before anyone could reach her. The classroom erupted. "What is wrong with her? Is she sick? Did someone beat her?" The cleaner dropped the broom in fear. Imade lay on the floor, shaking, tears rolling silently down her face. And for the first time, the city noticed her. At the hospital, doctors ran tests, blood tests, scans, observations. Everything came back normal. No epilepsy, no infection, no injury. The doctor sat across from Uera, tapping a pen lightly on the table. "Madam," he said carefully, "children sometimes react to trauma." Uera nodded quickly. Yes, trauma." But then the cleaner walked past the corridor again, broom in hand. Imade screamed so violently that nurses rushed in from other wards. The doctor stiffened. He looked at Uera differently now, lowered his voice. "Did you ever beat this child with a broom?" Uera broke down completely. The city had asked the same question Aro Etsu had asked. Word spread quickly. Parents whispered at school gates. Teachers avoided Imade's eyes. Cleaners refused to sweep near her. Some said she was pretending. Some said she was possessed. Others laughed. "Village fear," they said. But laughter died quickly. A boy punished with a broom fainted the same week. Another child screamed at night, claiming she was being swept. Patterns began to form. Uera noticed the looks, the blame, the fear, and worst of all, the mirror. She could no longer escape what she had done. At night, Imade began to dream. She stood on a wide red path. People passed through her, silently. They did not hurt her. They only looked tired. "Why are you here?" she asked them. "We were removed," they answered softly, "and we are unfinished." She woke up sweating. "Mama," she whispered one night, "I feel empty and crowded at the same time." Uere held her tightly, shaking. For the first time, Imade understood something clearly. What was happening was not sickness. It was inheritance, and it was growing. It started subtly. Imade would pause mid-step, her head tilting slightly, as though listening to someone speaking just beyond hearing. Sometimes she answered, not out loud, just a nod, a whisper. At school, teachers noticed she often stared at the floor long after others had moved on. "Imade," a teacher called one afternoon. "Are you with us?" She looked up slowly. "They're passing again," she said. The class went silent. "Who?" the teacher asked, forcing a laugh. Imade blinked. "I don't know their names," she replied, "but they were swept too." That was the day the school counselor was called, and the day Imade stopped being seen as just a sick child. The incident happened on a Saturday morning. A woman in the next apartment lost her temper. Her daughter had refused to sweep properly. In frustration, she grabbed a broom and struck the child once. Nothing dramatic happened at first. The woman laughed it off. But that night, the child stopped speaking. She stared blankly at the wall, unmoving, unresponsive. When they rushed her to the hospital, she screamed violently the moment she passed Imade's apartment. The girl collapsed. Imade screamed too. Both children screamed at the same time. The hospital lights flickered. Doctors froze. Parents screamed. That was when fear entered the city properly. Uera knew the truth before anyone explained it. Her guilt had ripened into certainty. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped defending herself. Each scream from another child felt like a blow to her chest. "It's spreading," she whispered to Osman one night. Osman nodded slowly. "She is becoming a path," he said. Uera clutched her wrapper tightly. "No," she cried. "She is my daughter." Osman said nothing, because both were true. Pa Ogiriga arrived quietly. No announcement, no ceremony. He stood at the entrance of the apartment building for a long time, leaning on his staff, staring at the concrete as though searching for something buried beneath it. "This place remembers nothing," he finally said. "That is why it is dangerous." Inside the room, Imade sat calmly. She looked at him and smiled faintly. "You came late," she said. Pa Ogiriga's heart sank. "What have you been hearing, child?" he asked gently. Imade's voice softened. "They say the path is open," she replied, "and it doesn't care where we live." That night, Pa Ogiriga spoke plainly. He told Osamen and Ewere what the elders rarely said out loud. "When a broom touches a child in anger," he explained, "the ancestors believe a mistake has been identified. They remove what they think is wrong. But a child is never wrong," he continued. "So removal creates a hole. And holes," he said quietly, "become doors." Imade had become a doorway for all the destinies swept before her. "And if the door remains open," Pa Ogiriga warned, "others will begin to pass through, willingly or not." Ewere collapsed to the floor. "What must we do?" she sobbed. Pa Ogiriga looked at Imade, and then away. "She must return," he said, "to where it began." They left the city before dawn. The roads were quiet, washed pale by early morning mist. Streetlights flickered weakly as the car moved farther away from concrete and noise. Imade sat at the back seat, silent. With every mile away from the city, her breathing slowed. Her shoulders relaxed. Ewere noticed it immediately. "She's calmer," she whispered to Osamen. Pa Ogiriga nodded without turning. "The city confuses what it cannot remember," he said. "The land does not." As red earth began to replace asphalt, Imade closed her eyes. "They're closer now," she murmured, "but quieter." Aroetsu village stood exactly as it always had. Palm trees swayed gently. Smoke rose from cooking fires. The air smelled of earth and history. But the moment Imade stepped out of the car, the wind shifted. Not violently, respectfully. She removed her sandals without being told. Her bare feet touched the soil. She gasped softly. "They know me," she said. Villagers gathered quietly, forming a wide circle. No one spoke. Everyone remembered. Pa Ogiriga led them toward the Iroko tree. Each step felt heavier. Iwere's legs trembled. This was no longer about running. It was about facing. The Iroko tree cast a long shadow. At its base, the earth was slightly raised. Pa Ogiriga knelt slowly and pressed his palm to the soil. "This is where it was buried," he said. Osman's throat tightened. He remembered the night clearly now, how the elders had wrapped the broom in leaves and lowered it into the ground, hoping silence would be enough. Pa Ogiriga began to dig. The earth resisted at first, then gave way suddenly. The broom emerged, old, cracked, dry. The moment air touched it, the wind rose sharply. Leaves scattered. Imade staggered backward, clutching her chest. "They're awake," she whispered. Imade fell to her knees, her hands pressed into the soil as her body shook violently. Her voice changed, not loud, but layered. "We were removed," the voices said through her. "We were unfinished." Ewere screamed and reached for her daughter. Pa Ogiriga stopped her. "If you touch her now," he warned, "you will interrupt what must be heard." Tears streamed down Imade's face. "We were swept because of anger," the voices continued. "We are not dirt." The Iroko tree groaned softly. The ground felt warm. This was not possession. This was memory demanding acknowledgement. Pa Ogiriga raised his staff. "This ritual does not ask for blood," he said firmly. "It asks for truth." He turned to Ewere. "You must speak," he said. "Not to us, to the land." Ewere crawled forward. Her voice broke. "I was tired," she cried. "I was angry. I forgot the law," she sobbed. "And I punished what I should have protected." Her tears soaked into the soil. The wind slowed. Imade's body relaxed slightly. Pa Ogiriga then turned to the girl. "And you, child," he said gently, "must choose." Imade lifted her head slowly. Her eyes were calm. "I will close it," she said, "but I know it will cost me." The village held its breath. The wind circled the iroko tree gently, as if waiting. Imade remained on her knees, her palms pressed firmly against the soil. Her breathing was steady now, too steady for a child standing at the edge of something dangerous. Yuara crawled closer, tears blinding her. "No, no, no," she whispered. "You're just a child." Imade turned to her mother slowly. Her eyes were clear. "Mama," she said softly, "they won't stop unless I do this." Pa Ogiriga's voice was heavy. "What you closed today," he warned, "will never open again." Imade nodded. "I know." The villagers shifted uneasily. Some turned their faces away. Others clasped their hands tightly, praying without words. This was not bravery. This was acceptance. Pa Ogiriga placed the broom gently on the ground between Imade and the iroko tree. "It must be touched willingly," he said. "No force, no fear." He began to chant softly, not loudly, not dramatically, but steadily, rhythmically, as though reminding the land of its own language. The air grew thick. Dust lifted slowly from the ground, circling Imade's knees like smoke. She reached out. Her fingers trembled slightly. The moment her hand touched the broom, the wind roared. The iroko tree shook violently, leaves raining down like tears. Imade gasped sharply, not in pain but in shock, as if something had pulled away from her chest. The voices rose, not screaming, exhaling, a sound like many breaths leaving the same body at once. Imade cried out, arching forward. Her grip tightened on the broom. Pa Ogiriga slammed his staff into the ground. "Enough!" he commanded. The broom split cleanly in two. The wind stopped instantly. The dust fell. Silence crashed down heavily. Imade collapsed forward onto the earth. Yuara screamed her daughter's name and rushed forward, pulling her into her arms. "She's breathing!" someone shouted. Pa Ogiriga sank slowly to his knees. "The path is closing," he whispered, "and it will never open again." Imade woke at sunset. Her head rested on her mother's lap. She blinked slowly, confused. "Mama," she asked, "why are we in the village?" Yuara's heart cracked open. Imade remembered her name, her parents, her childhood games. But when she looked toward the iroko tree, her gaze slid past it as though it held no meaning. The voices were gone, the dreams were gone, and parts of her memory, moments, emotions, fragments, had vanished quietly with them. Pa Ogiriga explained softly, "What closed the path took something with it. But what remains," he said, "is whole." Before dawn, the elders gathered. They buried the broken broom in two separate places, far apart, so it could never be made whole again. No chants were spoken, no celebration followed, only instruction. From that morning onward, the law was sealed stronger than before. A broom must never touch a child in anger, not in play, not in frustration, not in ignorance, because the land remembers, and once something is removed wrongly, it always demands a price. The villagers dispersed quietly. Aroetsu returned to its calm, but the warning had been sharpened forever. Morning came gently to Aroetsu, not with celebration, not with fear, with stillness. The kind of stillness that follows a storm that has passed, but not been forgotten. Yuara woke before everyone else. Her body ached as though she had carried a heavy load all night. Because she had. She looked down at her daughter. Imade slept peacefully, her breathing slow and even. For the first time in years, there was no tension in her small frame, no sudden jerks, no whispered words escaping her lips. Yuara pressed her palm lightly against Imade's chest, counting each breath, alive, present. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. Outside, Osaman sat on a wooden stool, staring at the red earth. He had not slept. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped. The village smelled different that morning, clean, damp, grounded, as though something heavy had finally left. When Imade opened her eyes, she felt light. Not happy, not excited, just light. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. "Mama," she said, her voice calm, "why do I feel like I rested for a very long time?" Uera froze. She forced a smile. "You were tired," she replied gently. "You slept deeply." Imade nodded. She did not ask about the Iroko tree. She did not ask about the broom. She did not ask about the voices. When a woman passed the compound sweeping gently, Imade did not flinch. Uera collapsed to her knees, sobbing quietly. Pa Ogiriga, watching from a distance, nodded once. "What has left," he said softly, "has left completely." Peace did not bring relief to Elwere. It brought clarity. Every laugh from Imade reminded her of what almost disappeared. Every calm moment reminded her of how close she had come to losing her child. Not to death, but to something worse. She stopped raising her voice, stopped rushing discipline. Sometimes when anger rose, she stepped outside and breathed until it passed. She never touched a broom again, not even to sweep. Other women noticed. "Uera has changed," they whispered. Yes, because guilt is a teacher that never sleeps. When the family finally prepared to return to the city, the departure felt different. They did not sneak away. They did not rush. They stood beneath the Iroko tree one last time. Pa Ogiriga placed his hand briefly on Imade's head. "You will live," he told her, "and that is enough." Imade smiled politely, not fully understanding. As the car pulled away, the elders watched silently. The law was no longer just a warning. It was sealed. Back in the city, life resumed, but not as before. The school adjusted quietly. Cleaners avoided raising brooms near children. Parents warned one another in hushed voices. "I don't know why," they said, "but don't do it." The story spread without names, without details, just consequence. And that was enough, because myths do not need proof. They only need memory. Years passed gently. Imade grew taller, calmer, and observant in a way that made adults pause when she spoke. She laughed easily, but never carelessly. She listened more than she talked. She noticed things other children ignored: tone, mood, silence. Teachers often described her as mature beyond her age. They did not know why. Imade herself did not know why. But sometimes, when other children were punished harshly, she felt a strange tightness in her chest, not pain, not fear, but understanding. She would step closer and say quietly, "Please don't be angry." And often, that was enough. The city adapted slowly. At first, parents simply avoided using brooms in anger. Then schools began discouraging it openly. No policy, no announcement, just practice. "Use your words," teachers said. "Talk to them." Cleaners were instructed to step away when discipline was happening. Parents began telling their children, "There are things you don't joke with." No one mentioned Aroetsu. No one explained the origin. The myth had outgrown its birthplace. Osaman aged faster than time required. His hair grayed early, his shoulders stooped. He became quieter, not because he had nothing to say, but because words felt heavier now. He watched his daughter closely. Every smile from Imade felt like mercy. Every calm day felt borrowed. Sometimes he sat alone in the evenings, staring at nothing, replaying the moment his wife had raised the broom. He never blamed Uere. He blamed the silence. The moment he could have shouted louder. The moment he could have stepped in. Some lessons do not announce themselves until it is too late. One afternoon, Imade came home quiet. A girl in her class had been beaten with a broom the night before. The child had not come to school. Rumors said she would not speak. Imade sat on the edge of her bed, her hands folded neatly on her lap. Yuara watched her carefully. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Imade looked up. "Why do people repeat what they've been warned about?" she asked softly. Yuara had no answer, but the city did. The parents involved were questioned. The school intervened. The warnings spread faster this time. The myth had teeth now. By the time Imade entered adulthood, the rule had become instinct. Parents didn't need reminders, teachers didn't need warnings, everyone simply knew. A broom was for sweeping floors, not correcting children. Those who asked why were met with silence. And silence, sometimes, is the strongest answer, because the story had already done its work. Osman grew old quietly, not bitter, not angry, just careful. He walked slower, spoke less, listened more. Sometimes Imade would catch him staring at her for a long time, as though trying to memorize her presence. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Osman called her to sit beside him. "I wanted to stop it," he said suddenly. "That day, I wanted to." Imade looked at him calmly. "I know," she replied. Osman's eyes filled with tears. "Knowing is not the same as doing," he whispered. That night, Osman slept deeply and did not wake again. Imade stood quietly at her father's burial. She did not cry loudly, she did not collapse. She felt the weight of something older than grief. As the final rites ended, she placed her palm gently on the earth, not in ritual, in respect. That evening she told her mother, "I will work with children." Yuara nodded. She understood without explanation. As an adult, Imade chose a simple life. She worked with families, spoke with parents, listened to children. She never told her story fully, she never needed to. When she saw anger rising in a parent's eyes, she spoke gently. Pause. Breathe. Choose wisely. And something in her voice made people listen. Some lessons do not need explanation. They carry weight on their own. Years later, in a modern hospital far from Aroetsu, a child screamed at the sight of a broom. Doctors rushed in, nurses froze, and once again a question was asked softly. Did anyone beat this child with a broom? Somewhere else, under an iroko tree that had never moved. The wind passed gently, the ground remained still. The law held. Elders in Aroetsu still tell the story, not loudly, not dramatically. They tell it when anger rises, when patience runs thin, when a child is still becoming. They say, a broom removes what should not remain. A child is not dirt, and anger travels farther than you think. That is why the rule remains, not written, not enforced, but remembered. And that is why, in Aroetsu village, and far beyond it, no one ever beats a child with a broom. Moral of the story: anger can last for a moment, but its consequences can follow a lifetime. Not every tool is meant for punishment, and not every tradition is superstition. Some warnings exist to protect what is still forming, a child's mind, spirit, and destiny. When discipline is guided by rage, it can remove more than pain. And once something precious is wrongly taken away, it may never be fully restored. That is why wisdom must lead correction, and patience must guide authority, because a child is not dirt to be swept away. If this story touched you, or reminded you of a warning you heard growing up, have you ever heard of a myth like this before? Does your culture also forbid certain things when disciplining a child? Have you ever experienced or witnessed something connected to such a belief? We would love to hear your story. Comment below and share the myths that hold strong in your culture. Your experience might teach someone else a powerful lesson. If this story made you think differently about discipline and tradition, tap the like button so this message can reach more families. Share this video with parents, guardians, and anyone who loves African stories. And if you enjoy deep, meaningful African folk tales like this, subscribe to African Tales by Imade where every story carries a lesson worth remembering.
And this is African Tales by Imade. See you in the next story. Bye, guys.